But I mean, circular economy is all about like doing more with less, saving more money, and then like as a good, fantastic bioeffect, it also saves the planet and the climate and the biodiversity and everything.
Got my coffee and today's guest here with me, so we're ready to roll. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. My guest today is Elin Bergman, known as the Circular Economy Queen of Sweden. Elin is the Circular Impact Officer and Vice Chair at CradleNet, a leading Swedish network dedicated to accelerating the transition towards a circular economy. She's also a co-founder and managing director at Nordic Circular Hotspot and a senior advisor at Success. And I'm sure we will be talking about that later in the podcast. Welcome to the show, Elin.
Well, thank you so much.
Great to have you. Really looking forward to our conversation today. But maybe to get us started, could you maybe just briefly introduce yourself and share a bit about your journey and the work you're doing at CradleNet and the other organizations I mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in CradleNet the last 10 years. People think that I started it, but I didn't. It's actually one of the oldest circular economy business networks in the world. So it was started in 2009. And it's based on the book Cradle to Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. Everybody asks about the name. Why don't you call yourselves Circular Net or something? But that's why. So it was founded even before the term circular economy existed. So that's the reason. And like you said, CradleNet is very successful. We have like almost 150 companies as members, which we teach everything about circular economy. We have meetings, which is kind of unique, every single Friday with them, where we teach them the latest news. But on top of that, we also have like this week's speaker, and we also produce a lot of reports. We make projects, we develop tools and guidelines, and we also try to influence policy a lot. So that's kind of what CradleNet does. And then I was also part of starting the Nordic Circular Hotspot that you mentioned in 2018, together with other similar organizations as CradleNet, where we try to accelerate transition in the circular economy, or for the circular economy in the Nordics, and try to work more over the country borders and so on.
Cool, perfect. And as you mentioned, I mean, CradleNet has been a pioneer and very instrumental in promoting circular economy in Sweden, but also beyond. I think it has had an impact also beyond. Can you share maybe a couple of projects or initiatives that you have had? You already alluded to a couple of them, but maybe go into a little bit more detail. And what were the key factors that contributed to the success of these initiatives?
Well, first of all, I think it's because we've been doing it before everybody else, talking about circular economy. So that's one of the reasons. But then when we started doing, we tried to, in the beginning, there was very little information about circular economy. So we wanted to figure out, what the reality of things were. And in 2018, the Swedish Minister for Climate and Environment was out saying that Sweden was the most circular country in the world. And I didn't recognize that image. So what we did was to develop a report, which is now called the Circular Economy Outlook Report, where we asked the large cap companies, the largest companies on the Swedish stock market, do you have a circular economy strategy? What does it look like? What do you do exactly? And when we asked them, it was only 30% of the ones that responded that said they have some type of strategy. And when we asked them what type of strategy it was more like, well, we recycle paper and glass. So it wasn't actually circular economy. So this was not in line with what the climate and environmental minister was saying. So we were saying, well, hey, this is not correct. And then the Swedish GAP report came out, the circularity GAP report, showing that Sweden was only 3.4% circular. So that was more in line with what we thought, which is actually under the global average, which is 7.2% circular. So so we try to always kind of like, if we don't really see that this is accurate or correct, then we try to find the science behind. Because I mean, we of course we want Sweden to be best, but we need to also know the baseline. Where are we right now? And then we did the same report again 2021, and we did it just now before summer 2024. And now actually a lot of things changed. In 2021 it was only 30% that said that they had a strategy, but now they understood what circular economy actually was, and they really had circular economy strategies put in place, but only 30%. Almost nobody had set a target. Now when we did it before summer, 90% are saying that they have a circular economy strategy, and they actually do. So it's amazing. You can really see the transition that's happened, and yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think circularity and sustainability as a whole, but circularity in specific, has come a long way over the past 10 plus years. And companies, but I think also society as a whole, understands the concept better and basically is incorporating that more into the business context and into the day-to-day operations, which I think is critical, so that it's not just an add-on, but that it becomes an integral part of what companies, what public organizations, and what consumers are doing in that context. Now, you mentioned you have a very broad set of member companies, of companies that you're working with. How do you see the differences between different industries in that progress? Is there a difference? Are there industries that are more front runners? Are there industries that are more laggers in this trend?
Yeah, you can really, since I've been doing this for such a long time, I can really see a big difference in trends. So when I started 10 years ago, there was a lot of fashion companies, textiles, because H&M was out saying, we're going to be 100% circular, and they was kind of dragging the whole sector with them. So there was a lot of focus on textiles and fashion at the time. And then it was a lot of furniture, because IKEA was saying the same thing. So there was a lot of furniture, and then Scania and Volvo and Polestar and all of these companies, car companies and mobility companies started. And then all those car component companies and car recycling and tire recycling companies came as members. So it's kind of been going on like that all the time. But now I have to say there's a shift, because like the report I mentioned, it's now, and I have to say that the reason for that is probably because of the new EU standard for reporting, CSRD, coming, and also the taxonomy, where they're shifting the financial flows in a sustainable direction, which is now making it mandatory for all companies on the stock markets in Europe to report on circular economy. So now everybody has to do it, and if you're lagging behind, then the investors will not be happy, and they will fund someone else. So, and you can really see here that the legislation is working, because companies are really doing a lot of things, and the laggards, they will be the ones, losing the whole, race for success. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's always this interplay, isn't it, between regulation and what's happening in the market, and one driving the other at the end of the day. And it's great to see that it has an impact in how companies are approaching these things. And it's just not an administrative burden on top, but it's really something they're approaching.
I think maybe now, sorry, I just wanted to say, add to your question. I think maybe now we will see a difference between the companies on the stock market compared to the ones that are not listed, because I think everybody will be affected eventually, because I think most of the companies on the stock markets buy from companies that are not listed. So they also want some type of reporting into their value chain reporting. So I think it will force everybody, including companies outside of the European Union, to report now, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to export to European Union.
Yeah, absolutely. And I very often have discussions with specifically small and medium-sized enterprises who basically raise their hands and say, like, oh yeah, we're not on the hook yet. It's a long way to go. What I'm normally answering is like, your biggest customers will basically need to report. very, very soon. Do you really think they will not turn around and ask you for the data, ask you for the products and the services and the materials that they will require in order to be compliant, in order to report, in order to be relevant in the market? So this will ripple through the supply chain, the value chain, very, very rapidly. And I'm wondering if small and medium-sized enterprises specifically are prepared for that, or how they will be reacting to this.
Yeah, so this is why we arrange a lot of events about this, because we want to prepare at least our members, even the ones that are not on the stock markets or listed, to be prepared. And we're showcasing all the tools that are out there, and different types of standards to use, and everything. But I think you're absolutely right. There are some ones that haven't figured this out yet, so they're gonna have a bit of a problem on their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. You've also been the co-founder of the Nordic Circular Hotspot. Do you see any differences between the Nordic countries? And do you have maybe some innovative circular economy solutions that you have come across either in your work at CradleNet or in the Nordic Circular Hotspot?
Well, we started the hotspot because, like I said, we really wanted to accelerate our transition and create more collaboration between the Nordic countries, because Finland was, running ahead of everybody, setting really good circular targets, which we don't even have in the other Nordic countries. Still don't have. So that's a bit of a disappointment from my point of view. We were hoping that we could catch up with Finland. We still haven't done that. But still, I think the dialogue is really good. We're funded by Nordic Innovation, which is fantastic. And what we're trying to do now with the amount of funding we have, which is, it's good, but it's not enough to do exactly everything that we wanted to do. I would like to focus much more on implementation. And now it's more communication, more communicating what's going on in the Nordic countries, more than actually focusing on what is not going on and what should be going on. But that's another discussion. Anyway, no. So we have something called the Nordic Circular Summit every year in the fall, which goes around between the Nordic countries. Last year it was in Iceland. This year it's in Finland, in Helsinki, where we try to showcase the latest that's going on in the Nordics, but also showcase the trends and how far we've come and what still needs to be done. But it's still, it's not like in the clean tech or climate tech where there's so much money being thrown around and they have huge events and things. So there's still some, I would say, some money and investment, muscle missing in this sector, which we're trying to change. So that's one of the things we do actually in the Nordic Circular Hotspot. We started one transition group for finance and banking, where we, together with them in the Nordics, sat down around a table and kind of develop a roadmap together. How can we make this sector, finance circular solutions, much more? And how can they evaluate circular companies or companies turning into circular business models in a different way, because they don't know how to do that, or they didn't know how to do that, and they still don't. But they need more guidelines and roadmaps and things to change that. So we're helping them with that.
Okay, that's great to hear, because I think, as you said, circularity is still underfinanced, and I think it's very often a lack of understanding of the new business models, and how they can make money at the end of the day. Because even if you're an impact investor, at the end of the day, your target is to make money and to create a return on investment in this context. So I think that will be critical to basically get the investment in, get the companies on board, get startups to really tackle, as you said, implement, not talk about it only.
Actually, that's why we did a project together with Stena Circular Consulting 2 years ago. It was EU funded, where we looked at the business model, product as a service, when you go from selling a product to selling a service instead. And we had, under so many years, startups coming in as companies, as members of CradleNet, failing and failing and failing. And then we had the really big ones like Xerox and Rolls-Royce and so on, really successful examples that did really, really well in this with these business models. And we were trying to figure out why did the ones that have the success, and why did the ones failed? So we did this project for 2 years together with Stena to look at what are the challenges, and we found 9 critical challenges. And
Okay.
then we developed a tool or methodology on how to address all of these 9 challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And we even did it together with companies to try this out, so they could try this successfully without falling into the pitfalls. So that's one way of how we work with this.
I think that's great, because I feel there's still a lot of discussion, theoretical, high level, abstract discussion around circularity, what it is, what it isn't, and how to approach it. I sometimes feel that the doing is falls short along the way, and there's not necessarily the tools, there's not necessarily the understanding to really bring this into the real world, so to say. But very often, also, it's the consumer side that's the difficulty in that. I mean, we are all people of habits, people of convenience. So as soon as a new business model, a new approach inconveniences, it becomes very difficult to change this behavior, change the consumer behavior, change the consuming patterns. Do you have any good examples of strategies, of campaigns, of approaches that have been effective in encouraging this change, this adoption to more sustainable practices?
Yes, you can see now this enormous success of the secondhand market, for instance.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
it's been quadrupled or even more the last years, and I don't think there was any big one campaign. It's more like a movement, especially on TikTok and all these social media. That, well, maybe you shouldn't be consuming so much, and also it
Mm.
doesn't only have to do with like stop buying new stuff. It's more like people want to be unique, and if you only buy H&M things or Zara, you will look like everybody else, and so it's kind of it's timing, it's new generations, and people trying it out and looking really cool, and then kind of drags everybody else with them. But the problem is we still have to have an inflow of new things into the secondhand market so people can keep buying, and it's still the really bad low quality things that are coming in. So we need to
Mm.
kind of shift also the producers making them so they can be bought on secondhand. For I mean, now we need to produce things that last a lifetime, so you can buy them
Mm.
many times over, really, and also don't wear out and so on. So there is a shift already. We're also one of the spokespeople and one of the organizations behind the Circular Monday campaign, which is a consumer campaign,
Mm.
and it started like a anti campaign for Black Friday, because that was the most horrible consumer campaign out there. You just try to push really shitty things out on the market for no cost, and really bad things flooded into, from Alibaba and all of these
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wish Chinese websites. So we tried it to kind of be an anti-movement for that, to talk about what you can, if you're going to buy something, buy sustainable. But the best thing you can do is not buy at all, because you save a lot of money. You don't have to. We don't have to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
50,000 things in our attics and cellars and things that we don't even know what it is. We don't need it. It doesn't make us happier. So that's now present in 40 countries. It's going to be on November 5th this year. So it's bigger than ever.
Yeah. That's great, because I think these are exactly the kind of initiatives that are needed to make it visible to people and understandable. There's this famous joke of someone coming home with a new piece saying, I saved 50 euros, which is not true. I mean, you spent 50, it was cheaper than the original price, but you didn't save money. There's not more money in your bank account because you bought the piece, this shows the way of thinking that we have basically internalized over many years as a society very often, which is basically very consumption driven and very like I have to have something in order to be something in that context. Do you see, you mentioned a little bit, do you see a generational shift there? Because that's something I've been observing with my teenage kids, that they consume very differently. But do you see that also on a broader scale with the member companies and in the activities you have?
I would say 50-50. I would say there is the Greta Thunberg generation, of course, super engaged, they don't want to they don't want to have anything at all. My bonus son is one of those. Like his biggest headache is when he has a birthday or when it's Christmas, because he doesn't know, he doesn't need it, he doesn't want anything. The only thing maybe is a game or something, so which is good because it's not a physical thing.
Yes.
But then we have the other generation, which in Sweden we call it the Bianca Ingrosso generation, which is basically like super famous influencers, just flying, private jets. It's kind of like the Paris Hiltons of my generation. So they don't really talk to each other, I can say. It's like a yeah, big divide between them. And so my headache is like, how do we get them to talk to each other and become friends, and how can we make the Greta Thunberg people win this fight, type of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I mean, how do you say, it takes a village to raise a kid? I think it takes more than a village to actually change this dynamic, because I can completely relate to that. I think it's you see both sides of this in society today, and it's actually throughout the different age groups. At the end of the day, I think in many age groups you see people that are aware and try to live accordingly, and there's the other side that tries to ignore it as much as possible and consume as much as possible in that context.
That's why I'm here. Right now I'm in Marbella in Spain, because it's one of the biggest consumer, billionaire densest places in Europe you can be, where luxury is like part of the culture. And I'm here to show everybody that they can't live here soon if we don't change, because they have invested so much money into luxury properties and things, but there's no water here because of climate change. I mean, the rain has disappeared. It's going to be so hot soon that they can have tourism, which is also a thing that everybody lives on. So it's a good investment for the future to actually change. And I try to do it in a glamorous way. I stopped flying 12 years ago. I'm a vegetarian. I don't buy anything new, only secondhand. And I look kind of, glamorous anyway. You could do it without having a
Yeah,
boring
yeah.
life. So I try to really be an advocate and also talk about that this is a good investment. And most people have kids. So, I mean, what not to invest in, but the kid's future? Of course, you should, instead of owning a third car or a sixth house or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and I fully agree. I mean, it doesn't mean you need to basically live like in the Stone Age in that context. So I think we've come a long way. Also, I mean, you mentioned being a vegetarian. That has changed tremendously in the last couple of years. I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for now 35 years plus. If I remember the days when I started, it was the French fries and the side salad you could eat.
And beans and
And
lentils.
yes, exactly. And back then, people looked at you very weirdly if you ordered that. Nowadays, every supermarket has a vegetarian, even vegan section. So I think we've come a long way in that sense. So I think it's really promising to see that progress and how far we've been coming. But there's still naturally a long way to go. In that context, how do you see the member companies approaching that to some extent also uncertain future of what will come next? Where do we go next? Where do we invest? But also, what will our business look like in the future?
Well, I think one of the reasons that they're members of CradleNet is they always the feedback I get all the time is that, like, oh my god, it's so nice to come to your meetings because they're so positive. I mean, if you join an environmental network, it's supposed to be like all these problems and we need to solve them. But I mean, circular economy is all about like doing more with less, saving more money, and then, like, as a good, fantastic bioeffect, it also saves the planet and the climate and the biodiversity and everything. So it's kind of it's a very positive narrative, around circular economy. And there are so many things popping up we also do like the latest news 10 minutes, so they don't have to do that every meeting on Fridays.
Okay.
And the amount of things coming out now, it's amazing. So it gives me hope, and I think it gives them hope as well. And I think that's really important. But we also need to keep the pace up, because right now it's still carbon emissions are rising instead of diminishing, and so on. So a big change will be changing the business models and how we design things and services from the core.
No, absolutely. The coffee is unfortunately empty. I could still keep talking with you for another half hour, but maybe before I let you go, maybe one final question. So, if there's a business out there that has not yet really bought into or has not really started their circular economy journey, what are, from your point of view, some of the things they could start with that are the easy starters, the easy things to basically get up to speed with? And maybe also, what are some of the pitfalls to avoid along the way?
Well, I think one thing you always have to have is to have the management team with you if you're going to, change your business model. But I think look at your business model. If you have any type of waste stream, then you should look at that, because it's probably worth something to someone else, or even worth something to you that you can actually make more money out of. So if you have any type of waste, make sure to make that into a resource instead. And once you start thinking like that and maybe make money, then you're interested in making even more money with doing more with less. So there's many things you could do. And when it comes to the pitfalls, well, sometimes you start really big projects and they're too heavy to really finish and so on. So don't get stuck in big projects. Just do what it can. Start small and then build from there, I would say.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Elin, for joining me today. Really inspiring what you've been achieving and what you're working on. So thanks a lot for joining me.
Thank you so much.
For all of you listening out there, we hope you found today's episode engaging, thought-provoking, and it sparked some new ideas and insights for you to start or accelerate your journey to circularity. If you enjoyed the show, please help us expand the Circular Coffee Break community by sharing it with your friends, family, colleagues, your network. You can also support us by leaving a 5-star rating or positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you're always up to date on the latest episodes. The only thing left for me is to thank all of you for listening today. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here at the Circular Coffee Break podcast.